Hello there and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. This is season 15, episode 68, and we are live with Paul Sztorc, CEO of LayerTwo Labs, which is one of the four sponsors of the show, alongside SideShift and No Ones, which is the new one that just joined, and also hodling.ch. And it's really exciting because I spoke with Paul for the last time on the show. I think it was in June when you decided to have this spontaneous contribution to the interview with Chris DeRose, but you didn't mention too much about what you're up to. Prior to that, you joined in January to talk about Drivechains, and at the time you were still hoping to get through this BIP process. But in the meantime, what became really interesting about the evolution of your attempt to create sidechains for Bitcoin was that you decided to not pursue this BIP process anymore, and you came up with this CUSF, which is the Core Untouched Soft Fork, which is a way for miners to activate and deactivate soft forks without consulting the opinions of the conservative core developers. And to me, this is pretty interesting. I did see some reactions in regards to your proposal. I did see how Todd tried to trash everything about it and say that
yes,
instead of
notice he
improving
said,
your ideas, you're trying to activate them in a different way.
yes.
And I don't know where this is going to lead, but it's exciting because
I definitely think that the fact that Peter doesn't like it is a very good sign. But notice that he kind of like he just kind of shotgunned a bunch of things. So he said, like, number one, this is a terrible idea. Like, the idea is objectively bad. And then number two, he said we should remove invalidate block from Bitcoin, which would be like extremely dangerous and would also not work in preventing the idea, because the idea has ways of working that don't involve invalidate block. That's just the simplest way. But he said we should remove invalidate block to prevent anyone from doing it. And then he said something like, some people I was sitting next to said it's a terrible idea and they'll never do it. So it's kind of like it's like in A Few Good Men when the guy transfers the guy off the base and he says his orders are always followed or whatever. It's kind of like, jumping off a cliff is a terrible idea. We need to build a fence around the cliff so that no one ever tries to do it. And then he's like, I talked to a bunch of people and they said they would never jump off a cliff. It's like, if the idea is really bad, then those other two things don't add up. So I think the fact that I actually think that this is the end game, and all these people are going to be I'm not sure defeated is the right word, but there's only so much longer. Something has to give, I think, because the actual BIP process doesn't work, and it becomes more apparent over time to everyone that they either have to have a process that actually works, like an alternative to CUSF, the Core Untouched Soft Fork. That would be something that actually works for activating BIPs. So where's that thing? And then otherwise, people have to say it's terrible to do any soft forks. But that also doesn't work, because in the world of open source, where you have all this variation and innovation all the time, you will eventually go. You'll eventually not be competitive. Of course, there are a lot of people who say that. They say that Bitcoin is the thing that is the most stable and it does not add features. But this ignores a lot of the realities as well. Like, the soft fork doesn't change Bitcoin; it leaves the old Bitcoin network exactly the way it is. So the soft fork is the thing that doesn't change Bitcoin.
But that's the funny part, right? Because I think it was a couple of days ago that you had this disagreement with Luke Dash Jr. And he believes that a soft fork is something that everyone must upgrade to. So it's sort of like a slow, hard fork.
Right. This is like the opposite of the truth for me. But Luke has always had this point of view, and I think it's even a fringe point of view among even ossifier people and among elite core developers. I don't think that a lot of people share his point of view. Not that that makes it wrong, but it is wrong, but not that that makes it wrong. I just bring that up because Luke is great and Luke is a genius. But he does have, he and I completely disagree on this idea of the soft fork. I mean, I have discussed this with Luke a bunch of times, and we just don't agree. But basically, Luke has his own private vocabulary of words, which make it very confusing to talk to him. But from my point of view, a soft fork is miners could build on one of two blocks. They may not even exist. They may just be aspirational blocks. They may be about to come into existence, but miners could mine on one or the other. They choose one path every time. They always choose to mine on the block that enforces the new tightened rules. To me, this is really like, we don't see, in the case of a soft fork that's written in code, we all know why they are mining one side over the other. It's because one of the functions returns, the script interpreter returns false or something. But to me, it's not fundamentally different than them just deciding to say, I'll never build on a block that ends in an even, the hash of the block is odd or something, where it's something that we never see. So to me, there could be like 100 soft forks that have been activated that we just don't know about at any given moment. But according to Luke, everyone must run the latest version of the software. I mean, it's very difficult to steelman Luke because, again, Luke has his like own weird definitions of things. But according to Luke, if you if you do not, like if everyone is not running a full node, then Bitcoin has died, according to Luke. So like, and Bitcoin just becomes a CBDC. So he's very black and white, of course. There's no like sense of, it's like we have totally decentralized Bitcoin and then it's like, bang, it just becomes a CBDC the moment a few people aren't running the latest version of Bitcoin Core. And he has never unraveled like the numerous threads that this is a cure worse than disease, because now you need to go to Luke to figure out which version is the latest version. If there's, or you need to go to Bitcoin Core, or you need to go to like Bitcoin.org. You need to go to somewhere to figure out, or you need to be an elite Bitcoin developer yourself, in which case you need to be a super specialist. That's how you find which version is the latest version. Whereas many people take a much more reasonable point of view and they just say, I will research it for a little bit, download a version, and then I will wait to upgrade, until I am ready to upgrade, which is very, very reasonable for a lot of reasons. You don't have to be, could be an issue with the new software. You have the opportunity to look around and see who's going to be hit by the bug first. They're going to hit Coinbase or whatever with the bug. So you have an opportunity to get familiar with it before switching. It's just annoying to upgrade software in general, so don't break it. If it's not broke, don't fix it. It's ironically a very pro-ossification point of view to just upgrade like slowly and behind 3 to 6 months behind everyone else. That's a very reasonable thing, and that's what most people do. But according to Luke, you can like trip some wire at some point and then Bitcoin is dead, or Bitcoin becomes a CBDC. He has this totally black and white point of view that I think is ridiculous.
I mean, it goes against even what Satoshi said, right? Because he was counting on people running SPV wallets.
Right, he was.
There's
Satoshi
actually
was
a
very
section in the
reasonable.
white paper about it.
Yeah, and he is. This is a big debate. The SPV wallets have the flaw that they must get some information from a full node. So it's kind of like cheating in a way. But it's really not cheating because most people do not. I mean, it's actually a non-starter to ask someone who's new. This is another thing that I have debated with Luke about. Luke says that you have 100 users. They all use full nodes. According to Luke, if you add 10,000 users to that who are SPV, then like Bitcoin is dead or something. I mean, this is me trying as hard as I possibly can to understand Luke. He may go on Twitter and say this is not it at all, but he says like something like 80% of the network or some percent. Then people try to pin it down, and they say, well, what percent needs to be full nodes? And then he gives some kind of evasive answer. I mean, I don't know. All I can do is tell people that I'm doing the best I can to try to figure out what is Luke, what his argument is. But he thinks like if you have 100 users and maybe 50 of them are full node, 50 SPV, then Bitcoin is a failed project. The whole thing is failed. Doesn't matter. Like it's no difference between it going to zero or the price going to zero or no one using it or at all. This is just 100 black and white. It's dead. And so then, but I asked him like, what about how are we going to get new users? Regular lay people who are just normal people. They are not going to if the pitch is oh, you should try this new thing. It's called Bitcoin. It's going to take up 700 gigabytes on your hard drive before you can use it. Most people are, people are not going to do that. You need to give them, at least at the very minimum, you need to give them the SPV wallet first so that they can play around with $50 worth of Bitcoin. Figure out what's going on.
It's not black or white, right? Because you also have Neutrino, which is this BIP that was actually developed to support Lightning Network wallets, which basically lets you download block filters, and it works on mobile wallets. It's sort of...
It is a slightly improved SPV mode.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also something that these zero-knowledge proof people are trying to achieve, which is to verify against the zero-knowledge proof within a few seconds. And
yeah, I'm very skeptical of this. I think this is totally misconceived. So, for example, that having the zero sync the headers, all this is actually a mistake. I think actually we can get into that if you want, but I think that this whole thing is a mistake. There's only two. There's one thing, which is there's the so-called full node, which has the property that it contains the whole blockchain, and it doesn't have any data availability issue because you have the whole blockchain. And you can send...
Interesting, because I thought that the full node is something that only validates your transactions. So you can prune it to only contain the transactions that make sense to you.
Right. So I kind of disagree with that. But, it's a complicated issue. But basically, I think there's the full node, which is like...
That's the archival.
Yeah. And it's like if everyone on Earth their computer is hit with a meteor, you can like regenerate the whole network with this node. And the other thing is, all those other things that try zero sync SPV, it's like you have SPV is kind of a little bit like you have a big library with like a photocopying thing, and you can go into the library, find a book, and turn it to a page, make a photocopy of the page. That's like your transaction, and walk out with the photocopy. But if everyone only has SPV nodes, it's like you just have photocopiers. There's no library. So that's the free writing. Everyone's free writing on the full node. And in order to get all this information in the first place, like it has to come from somewhere. So I think the data availability problem is the problem. And people say stuff like, oh, we have this new thing and it solves all these things. It's a full node, but it doesn't have data availability. But I think data availability is the only thing, because it's just because it's the only thing that you cannot get. You can't, like, if no one does the data availability, the data is not there on the blockchain. No one knows if the blockchain contains valid transactions or not, because no one knows what's in the blockchain. So now you have no idea. You have no choice but to just like go back to the last point in the blockchain where people actually have the data, and then just start again, because you have no choice. So the data availability is the whole thing, and everything else is just a different version of SPV. And what's worse is all of those other things, zero sync, ZK snark, whatever, all that stuff. I think most of that is really a big waste of time. I think Neutrino is actually a good idea, but because it helps with the privacy of the SPV mode. But like the reason it's a waste of time, let me explain, it would not be a waste of time. It would be a good use of time if we lived in a world where people were constantly being tricked. They would get a bunch of block headers, 80-byte block headers to have the proof of work. And they were constantly being tricked into going onto the wrong chain. And so they said, oh, I have 3 confirmations, but they're not real blocks. They have the valid proof of work, but they're fake blocks. But that has literally never happened, and it never will happen, because the headers already have, the miners have to do all the proof of work on the headers. So I don't know if this explanation is going to make any sense to anyone. But the headers, Satoshi's SPV mode already basically is a ZK proof. The proof of work is a ZK proof that the block is valid. It's not a literal proof, but actually its reliability is the same. It's in the same class of thing of like being 99.999% reliable. So it actually makes no difference in practice.
Okay. I'm trying to remember how we got here. So
we're talking about Luke and Luke's weird,
exactly.
People's weird ideas about, like, Luke's ideas, a theory about what constitutes Bitcoin surviving, which is that a very high percentage of the nodes are full nodes. Otherwise, Bitcoin's dead. his refusal to accept the fact that there are like aspirational users who you would have to ramp up. At first, on day one, they don't run any kind of node. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, but
on day one, they don't run any coins, they don't run any kind of node. So if we can get them up from nothing to SPV node, and then maybe 3 months from now they will run a full node because they'll see that this actually has a privacy benefit that they like. Because one benefit of the full node is you download every transaction, so no one knows. Excuse me. No one knows which transaction is yours because you download them all. So anyone watching you, they have no idea. Whereas the SPV has this trick that you're asking about. Oh, what about transaction number 45,203? Then anyone who's watching you or the full node who's talking to you, they know, well, he's really interested in this transaction. So that's what Neutrino tries to confuse that by you ask for like this mask that could apply to many different transactions, or you ask like a bunch of decoy transactions or something like that. So that is why I like that idea. That's very clever.
Yeah, and it goes back to a proposal. I mean, it's similar in philosophy, but different in what it tries to achieve. There was Dandelion which was proposed for Bitcoin Core, and it was meant to basically mix the IP addresses of nodes so that you cannot pinpoint to a specific node and associate it with an IP address. And for some reason, that was never implemented. It made its way into Monero. It made its way into, I think it's Zcoin or Zero Coin, which is an early version of Zcash, and now it's called Firo.
So it's a very clever name, Dandelion, because the first person broadcasts the transaction with like a little counter, and then it goes like in a line, like a stem. It goes from node to node to node, only forwarding it to one person. And then after the timer runs out, that person broadcasts it to the whole network. So it poofs out like a dandelion, you know? It's a very clever name. And then no one knows, just because you broadcasted the transaction to the whole network, no one knows if that is yours or if you just were the last one, the hot potato. So I thought that was a clever idea. But yeah, it was not. There was some technical argument given for why not to do it, but I don't remember what it was. It seemed like it was a perfectly fine idea. I mean, what's the downside? I don't know. Doesn't seem like there is any, but there must have been something, or maybe not. This is the other part of the issue, which is that the competence of Bitcoin Core has been steadily declining, and that is the real issue. Is that it's become bureaucratic. No one wants to actually take responsibility for making the software good. It's just a committee, a round robin, which is, on one sense, understandable because no one wants to be like, oh, we're pointing to you and saying, you are responsible for Bitcoin Core. Like you are basically like a Satoshi, and we don't like Bitcoin, so we're going to take it out on you. But it has the problem that when no one is responsible, then the quality degrades very, very much.
Well, something that I do want to mention on the topic of full nodes is that we have this alternative client of Bitcoin, which is called Libbitcoin. And the maintainer of the project, Eric Voskill, was able to get this. I think he ordered like a $300 computer and was able to synchronize the full node from Genesis on that one in like 2 hours.
Yeah. In fact, I think he said 53 minutes is like he was achieved a few times. And at one point, there's a theoretical limit, which is just your internet speed divided by, is it the size of the blockchain, like divided by your internet speed? And I think he thinks that he can like come very close to that limit, which is shocking because Bitcoin Core takes like, at least a day. Depends on the machine, depends on everything, but it takes a while.
Yeah, you need a lot of RAM and fast internet. At least that's been my experience. But My question is, why do you think we're not getting these? We're not getting Dandelion, we're not getting fast sync with these optimizations from Libbitcoin. And it seems like we look at core like it's sacred and it's not meant to be touched.
Well, I mean, Ava Chow has explicitly explained on Twitter that the policy is not to do anything controversial. And the policy is that if anyone threatens any kind of lawsuit or whatever, that they will yield completely to that threat. So it is like a threatocracy. So it's a horrible decision, but so we have to find a way around this disastrous governance scenario.
I mean, I do understand that all of them got sued by Craig Wright, and it was not a pleasant situation. But when you sign up,
now they have reacted to that by saying we will preemptively avoid. They're letting the terrorists win. Basically, they're saying we will preemptively act in a way such that it's like appeasement. They're just saying we don't want to be sued, so we will not touch anything important. They have a view that's just, how can I deflect? It's a very bureaucratic EU, everyone's sitting in a circle, kind of like, you don't know, there's no one that says, there's no one to actually address any problem to. They all just want to deflect the blame to someone else, and that no one wants to do the right thing, which is display any kind of responsibility for the project being good. They only think about how can they deflect blame away from themselves. So of course it shouldn't, in that sense, it should not be a surprise that Eric Voskuil is just like one guy tinkering with it, but who actually cares? See, because when Eric Voskuil does his work, he's getting up every day. I mean, I don't think he's literally working on it every day, but when he sits down to work on, his project, he is thinking, how can I make this project really good? But the Bitcoin Core people are not. They're thinking, how can I get more social status? How can I avoid being criticized? So of course, that's like hell on earth, basically. Who wants to be a part of that project?
Eric Voskuil is this engineer / mechanic type. I do know that he built his own motorcycle from parts, and he is the tinker type. So I do see him spending a lot of time playing with parameters, seeing what works, what is a good idea, what's not a good idea. I do know that Libbitcoin was exploited, and they did lose some money like a couple of years ago. And that was a major incident.
I'm not familiar with the details of that, but I do think there was something like he had like a randomness thing early on, and he had in the comments, it says like, do not use this. But someone else used it. So I think there was a little bit more nuance. I do remember that though. And he should, I think, even though that sounds like an unfortunate situation, I don't really know anything about it, knowing basically nothing about the details though, but I would say that Eric should not go in the direction of Bitcoin Core and try to deflect responsibility. He should say, okay, listen, I did say not to use this, and the user screwed up also. But since I want Libbitcoin to be the absolute best piece of software on planet Earth, I will now take responsibility for fixing not only all the Bitcoin Core performance suboptimalities, but I will also take responsibility for fixing this other thing. So I think that he should, whatever, sort of, I'm not saying that he is to blame, but I think he should, the more responsibility someone takes, the better. So that's just how it is. Better the product will be.
It's sort of messed up because I do have this feeling, and I'm not sure if you share it with me, that as Bitcoin becomes more mainstream and we get to this phase, I think David Bailey is pushing it into this political sphere where I saw him today tweeting about super nations that are going to be accumulating a lot of Bitcoin and getting a lot of hash rate. And it seems like the stakes are getting much higher. And this window of opportunity for improving Bitcoin is narrowing down.
I don't agree. Well, I mean, I do agree, but I think I wouldn't despair. I think everything David Bailey is doing And even to some extent, what Michael Saylor is doing, even though Satoshi would like, if Satoshi could see that if he were today and he could see that the plan is to have corporations and nation states adopt Bitcoin, I think he would just be like what the heck? You know, he'd be like so confused as to how, because he'd be like, but he would be, my guess is he would be thinking like, okay, but which people, who has the private keys, and like, won't those people just steal the coin? Which I think we will continue to see this. The FTX Mt. Gox pipeline, I think it will continue. It's only a matter of time before, and I don't want to name any names because then it looks like I'm like, but I hate to say anything, but it could be all of the in El Salvador. You have a giant pot of money. Okay, so that's the same thing as running an exchange. You have a huge pile of money there. El Salvador, MicroStrategy, whatever. BitGo. I hate to say, I'm not trying to say anything about these particular. I'm just saying this type of thing is set up to fail. Where you have Mt. Gox, you have Bitfinex, you have whatever. There's just a giant pile of money. Everyone's going to try to steal it. Everyone's going to try to do whatever they can to take it. So this type of thing, the idea of having government have this huge thing, it's going to be very difficult to pull off, and there will be black swan FTX type thing where people say, and the thing that collapses will be whichever thing people most overconfidently believe is the most secure thing. So wherever the delusional optimism is, that is the thing that will, that's where there'll be the next hack. Could be an actual hack, could be just be an inside job where the person says we got hacked. Meanwhile, they take all the coins. So, I mean, I just think it's a force of nature. It's like a guarantee. It will happen again. It will happen over and over. It will happen forever. So.
Yeah, this is sort of messed up, and you did say indirectly that you believe that Michael Saylor and whatever he's doing right now is going to be the next FTX or the next Terra Luna or whatever.
Well, okay, he has this point of view where he thinks like Bitcoin with yield is better than Bitcoin without yield. He insisted on that, even safety, and tried to. And I think safety is. I don't have a super high opinion of safety, but he was looking like a genius when he was talking to Michael Saylor. And he was trying to even let him off the hook with like a little lighthearted joke about, oh, I'd rather have like 5 million%. And Saylor doesn't even understand like what safety is talking about. Like safety tries to take like an extreme case to make the argument very clear. And like Michael Saylor, it's going right over his head. I don't know. Like, I think he's got some nutty ideas. But the reason I bring it up is David Bailey, Michael Saylor, whatever, all these other people. El Salvador, Presidente. All the adoption is good, and it may mean that Bitcoin Core, the software, suffers as a result in some ways, but it does open the door to certain things. Okay, so you have like wrapped Bitcoin. The Bitcoin, like, it could be the case that BTC is like the interface it's the bridge between the US dollar, the fiat world, and the crypto world, the HTLC world or something, And so then you have all these other things, HTLC, wrapped Bitcoin. You could have all these things that where those things cryptographically swap for BTC, and then BTC swaps for it. So even if BTC became like central bank digital currency coin, and it was like only adopted by corporations and governments, and it had like some kind of KYC, as long as it retains the ability to interface cryptographically, like hash functions and other things, it will still be a bridge into the privacy coins. So, and if it doesn't, so either it will be the USB port into the privacy world, and at which point the whole thing will be still pretty private, or BTC completely 100% captured, in which case I think BTC has no value in that situation. So I think that won't happen. You know what I mean? Because in a world where everyone is KYC, this was actually what the 2016 era, the Chris DeRose, Josh Unseth era. In a world where everything is like KYC'd and everyone's identity is known, then the entire proof of work thing is completely superfluous and has no value over just signatures. And the entire blockchain structure is just a pointless 7 transactions per second limitation that is completely. And you see this. We have seen this play out consistently with Ethereum versus like Solana, or like you could say Bitcoin versus Ethereum. Ethereum is way less decentralized, but still there's a bunch of users that don't care. And then Ethereum, the issue is now Solana outflanks Ethereum. Solana says, and then the Ethereum people have to say, oh, that's not as decentralized. Oh, then you have BTC versus Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin SV. And then Solana is now outflanked by, Base and all these other things. So we have a situation where we'll have the whole spectrum of decentralization. And so it doesn't actually matter if, so more adoption is always better, because even though it might screw up the BTC software or even the BTC coin, it will still be the bootloader or whatever. It will be the like the first, like in an atomic bomb, they need the first explosion to trigger like the second explosion. It's like a 2-stage explosion. I'm not sure if that's common knowledge or not, but they need, in fact, I think they need a few. It depends on the design, but like, so I think, right? Don't you have like the first one has to like heat everything up and make it really, and then the second one like explodes and destroys a city or something. I'm not an expert on such things, but some things have 2 stages. Like Starship Heavy, Starship, there's the booster, and then it detaches. So there's 2 stages. So anything that gets this up, maybe that's just the booster. And so the bizarre implication is that it may not be Bitcoin that is the winning coin. But that depends on like a million factors. But I do think that in general, we want more adoption, even among the crazies, the governments and corporations. So I think, even what Michael Saylor is doing is a net positive, even though it caused a lot of negatives. And I think David Bailey also is very positive. All the political stuff that's much better than the reverse. Although it does change everything around, I think.
I mean, this is why I enjoy inviting you, Paul, because every time you get on the show, you have a fresh perspective. I did notice, and it's impossible not to pay attention to the fact that WBTC has more liquidity than Lightning and Liquid and Rootstock and
by like a factor
else
of like 100
combined.
or something. Yeah. Right.
And it has more volume simply because people want to use their Bitcoin for smart contracts and stuff. And Ethereum provides that. And I did see news like yesterday or something. There's this. So basically it's like Monero, but with tokens, and it's called Xano, and Roger Ver is promoting the whole out of it. And it's trying to tokenize Bitcoin right now. So basically you're going to have ZBTC or something, and that one's going to be moved around with Monero level privacy. And I do see some value, like there's going to be
this is a very
chain
important
for
topic.
Contracts, and there's going to be another one for privacy. And it's messed up because this is exactly my tweet from yesterday. I said, some guys would rather see Xano succeed instead of activating Drivechains.
Yes. So the key point here, and this is a very good thing that you brought up, it's very, very important, which is that this is an implication of the view that Bitcoin Core isn't, very good right now, and also that just Bitcoin Core is not aggressively pursuing new features as quickly as possible, which I think everyone would admit that now. That's not even a controversial thing. The Bitcoin Core priority is not improve the software as rapidly as possible. Everyone would agree with that statement, right? Because everyone says, well, now it's like, don't break it, change it very slowly, never change it, etc. So in that world, there is no Bitcoin maximalism, because now anyone who wants the new feature must, by definition, get it from a different project. So you can't have it. You have to pick your poison, right? Either you say Luke Dash Jr. or ossification. Ossification, people say It's basically Luce Dash Jr. says no changes without total agreement. And the ossification people are like a subset of that. They say, well, the only thing we will agree to is no changes. So either you say no change unless everyone agrees, but then on the other hand, innovation is just change if one person wants a change. So now, once you've explicitly said that there's no, we are not prioritizing innovation, and we are not prioritizing adoption, and we are not prioritizing features, then anyone now all the entire altcoin thing is totally legit, and it is in fact anti-competitive guild monopolism to like just say, oh, we want Bitcoin Core to be the only thing, because now you're just saying we know our thing doesn't have the features, but we want you to buy it anyway, even though it doesn't solve your problem. So it actually flips the whole thing around completely. So it's quite an interesting development. I would never have thought this. And one final thing to point out is that BIP 300, the whole point of BIP 300 is that it is not, as a soft fork, it is not a change to BTC, like the Bitcoin Core at all. And it gives you all these new features without them being on Bitcoin L1 and without anyone on Bitcoin 1 on L1 noticing them at all. So it's like even that type of a thing where the change is not even seen by anyone who doesn't want to see it. When people say, oh, we have a problem with that. Well, now Bitcoin maximalism is like completely dead, I think, because people are saying it doesn't matter. Like people are just saying, we just want to kill the feature just for the sake of killing the feature. Even if the feature has no effect on L1 Bitcoin at all, to the point where you wouldn't even notice if some other people were using it. The same reason why I don't, if someone does a Bitcoin transaction, I don't know if they wanted to buy, if they're buying hot dogs or hamburgers or something else. That motivation is invisible to me. The same thing is the L2 would be invisible. The BIP 300 L2 would be invisible. People say even that. So then now what they're saying is they just want to kill all the features out of spite, even though it has no effect on L1. So that is where we are. And I think and so now, of course, now it makes perfect sense to launch an altcoin because you literally have no alternative. And it makes no sense at all to call Bitcoin Core meritocracy. It's an anti-featureocracy. So people could try to say that something's better if it has less features. But
no, it's silly because you are one of the true Bitcoin maximalists who are trying to maximize what Bitcoin does. But for some reason, the term has been redefined to mean conservative. So you're a maximalist right now if you just, I guess, post your... I don't want to get there too much, but there are a bunch of guys who just post their gains from MicroStrategy stocks. And they are proud in the fact that Bitcoin hasn't changed. And they're rejecting... I think there's a very strong resistance even against these covenants, which honestly I don't see as being harmless. And I appreciate that there's Floppy, the Floppy guy, who was also on the show, and I know he also works for LayerTwo Labs, and he's making this effort to add...
he's a very cool guy, but he like showed up for like a month, and then he didn't really, he's like a very interesting, I think that guy's a genius, but he doesn't really like, he like poked his head in and did one or two things and then departed, kind of like a Mary Poppins figure, but he was a very interesting guy.
Yeah, anyway, he's putting together this Wikipedia page where he puts names of developers and what they think about various covenant proposals. And it's interesting to see where people agree and where they disagree. And
well, it's clear that all of them are harmless in the sense that you could every soft fork you could just shut off later. So 51% hash rate to turn it on, and then 51% hash rate to turn it off. And as I said before, my view is that there could be 18 soft forks that miners have already activated that we don't know about. So I like the idea of them being harmful is ridiculous to me. That all of them, it's impossible for them to be harmful, including BIP 300. So they should all just be activated. It's very funny that everyone else is tying themselves into these weird knots and saying, something will happen, but it doesn't make any sense. If it's something that miners incentive, if it's something that makes more money for miners, they will do it, and you cannot stop them. And so the whole discussion is pointless. If it will not make them more money, they will not do it. If it does, if it has some kind of negative consequence that actually affects users who are paying transaction fees or the price of the coin, miners can shut it off, and they will shut it off, and you can't stop them from shutting it off. The key thing in our era, I think, is that the miners are specialists at mining. They find cheap power and all this other stuff, but they have yet to, because the block reward is still higher than the transaction fees, they are not interested in what the software does. They're only interested in mining. Eventually, this will all flip, and then at that point, it will be impossible for, I mean, every idea that I've ever had will be, I think, totally vindicated, and the equilibrium will just switch to exactly what I have always said it would be back in 2015. But we are living through a period where temporarily the miners do not care about the software, but that will change. Eventually, it will change because they have to maximize the transaction fees.
Yeah, at this point, let me plug LayerTwo Labs, which has been a sponsor for many months now.
I'm on the show. You don't have to plug this.
You guys have been shipping code, and it's important to describe this and explain to people that it's not just an idea. It's actual code that you can run on the Bitcoin Signet. You go to layer2labs.com/download, and you're going to find software for, I guess it's on all major desktop operating systems. And this can give you a pretty good idea of what the future is going to look like. You have the Z-side sidechain for privacy. You have a big block sidechain for low fees and scaling. And you also have prediction market and assets.
Yeah, that's not finished. Okay, so if you go to releases.drivechain.info, and then there's a folder with all the pre-CUSF stuff, which all worked to some extent. But now we to retool it to do the CUSF, which is sort of new. I think only one of them will actually work, and it may not work on Windows right now. But what the point is, if you go on GitHub, you can see people are working on it every day. So pop in, try to run it, and then pop into the Telegram and tell us when it didn't work. Because we're redoing it a lot for CUSF. But yeah, we had all this stuff that worked, earlier this year. Then I decided that this CUSF thing is the way to go. So the CUSF thing is, instead of waiting for Bitcoin to activate a soft fork, which I think will take like a long time, a prediction market on when the next soft fork will activate would be very, very interesting to me, because I think a lot of people know that it. We'll come back to that. That's a very important point. Don't let me forget. But instead of waiting around for Bitcoin Core to activate soft fork or code one or whatever the process is. No one really knows what the process is anymore. But instead, the core Untouched Soft Fork is just a thing that miners run in addition to Bitcoin Core. And this activates the soft fork, even with Bitcoin Core just staying exactly the way it is. No changes to the code, no changes to the binary or anything. So when you download it now, what it does differently than what it does earlier in the year, it just downloaded which is like our own version of Bitcoin Core that we had, like a fork of like 1699 from like a long time ago. Now, downloads the latest version of Bitcoin Core, like the real one. It does change the Signet 60 seconds, but has nothing to do with anything. Downloads the actual real Bitcoin Core and runs it in the Signet mode, which is with fake coins, but it's the same software. And then it downloads this activator thing, and then it now downloads a new graphical user interface that they've been working on, which I think is great. And then it will download the L2, the large block L2 that I call Thunder. So yeah, give this a try. And but because we have recently changed it from something that worked to this new CUSF thing, not everything works. But you can go to releases.drivechain.info and find all the old software that did work. And once we fix this, it should be easy to port all the changes that we made. The software that we wrote the first time, we'll just move it into this new version. The CUSF thing is way better because there is no, like, now we have to talk about this whole line of argument, which is like, Okay, Jeremy Rubin did CTV. I don't even know when that was finished. I think it may have been finished in like 2018 or 2019. The code is finished then. Op Vault, Op Cat. All this stuff, like the code is finished, but you have to go through the BIP process, which is just like a lot of people talking for years and years and nothing getting done. No one wants to take responsibility. A perfect example is Taproot, where they finished the code and the people who worked on the code refused to even discuss activation because everyone knows that it's a politically sensitive issue. So then someone else had to propose speedy trial. That was very controversial. Everything's controversial because it's very political. But you can see the timeline. Let me return to I know this is a lot of bizarre points. But let me return to a point that I was making about, Moon Settler, my friend. I love Moon Settler. Great guy. And I was talking to him. I believe this was December of last year. So I think it was a whole 12 months ago on a Twitter space. And he said he was getting behind L-Enhance because he thought it had the best chance of getting consensus, among developers. And I said, well, what are you going to do if it reaches the end of 2014? Excuse me, 2024. Whoa, my mistake. What are you going to do if we time travel is the best? What are you going to do if we make it to the end of 2024 and there's still no progress on L-Enhance being activated? And then he's like, oh my God, then I think I would just quit Bitcoin. Stuff like that. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the point is, it's a recorded space and people can look it up. The point is that people feel like the next soft fork is always like 3 months away or something, but really, when you get there, it's another 3 months, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on, and there's no progress towards actually getting any of them activated. So like what I'm saying is, where's L-Enhance now? You can say that maybe there's been a little bit of progress over years, but so the question is, we extrapolate that out, where are we going to be 12 months from now? Probably we'll make about as much progress in the next 12 months as we made during the previous 12 months. And I have, as you may have seen, I had a graphic about the what we used to do, a soft fork every 6 months. We used to do 2 a year. Then we did only in the next, in the first like 7 to 8 year period, we did 16. In the second 7 to 8 year period, we did 2. And one was SegWit took 26 months from when it was coded to when it was activated, and then Taproot took 40 months. So it's just been getting slower and slower. So that is why I redid what I was working on for this CUSF idea. And another interesting property of the CUSF idea is that it's very, 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 very easy to, because it doesn't even mess with the full node software. It's very easy to deploy it on a different L1. So any L1 can do it, like Litecoin or whatever. So some people are interested in that. So it does expand this new dimension of competition, which is kind of neat. But yeah, if you go to the software, if you go to the site, you can download. You can see our software. If you go to the GitHub LayerTwoLabs.com or LayerTwo Labs organization on GitHub, you can see all of the work that people are doing every day to ship the code. Please try to run the code, but it may not, because if you pop into Telegram and tell us what happened if you got it to work. But yeah, it was actually annoying because months ago I had like everything was like working very well, and then I decided to switch to the CUSF thing, which is pretty complicated because you have Bitcoin Core, and then you have this other thing, and what does everything talk to is just a little bit of a grind. But it is much better because the alternative is to deal with Bitcoin Core, which is, again, they're determined to, like, Bitcoin Core is set up so that it's like you have to go through a lot of people and justify all of your decisions. So if you are if you have the best decisions and you are actually have the smartest, best idea, you're at a disadvantage because everyone else is still catching up to you.
It is pretty political, and it's easy to be hated when you're participating in these discussions. I think it got to a very ridiculous point where people are shilling custodial solutions and they claim, it's the best that we have and we don't want to change Bitcoin too much. So you either use this or you're a shitcoiner. And I don't like it too much. I don't know. I like the idea of eCash. I do get the point that people who use custodial Lightning can get better privacy, but I don't see the value in it when it's being promoted as the scaling and privacy solution.
The problem with eCash and the problem with the whole ecosystem is evolving in the wrong direction. So it's always just like assuming that people use custodial Lightning. What can we do? And same with, so I mean, I love Taj Draja and Joseph Poon, who invented the Lightning Network. Those guys are great. I love Taj. Up next, Taj presented on, can we have an L1 block size increase? So even Taj has decided to use his enormous political capital as the creator of Lightning. And he's trying to expand the creative direction of saying, can we destigmatize the L1 block? So I don't agree with that, but I think he's doing the right thing by trying to say, okay, can we just talk about what is actually a good idea? And so he's great. And then Barak, who invented ARC, Barak is also great. But these two ideas are not good. Lightning and ARC will take us in the wrong direction for a lot of reasons. But they take us in the direction of developers collecting salaries, confusing things that the VCs will be confused by, so they'll fund. They take us in this direction of just not caring about the end user's experience, because the experience is terrible, where you like have to keep refreshing your funds and you need a live connection. It's terrible for privacy. It's terrible for everything, really. And it ultimately won't work because the transaction fees on those L2s are not piped down to the miner, so they cannot compete with an L2 that does, such as BIP 300, where the transaction fees are sent down to the L1 miners. So ultimately, it's going to be a huge waste of time. And you can see, I mean, imagine you had time traveled to the past. You time traveled to scaling 2, which was in December of 2015. So you go 9 years in the past, and people said Lightning Network is 3 months away. And then you try time travel to the past, and then the people there ask you, oh, like, how did, what was Lightning Network like in 2016 or in 2017 or in 2019? These are the same mistaken people who have a track record of being totally wrong. Again, the Lightning Network, the number of coins is like 4,000 or 5,000, whereas wrapped Bitcoin is like 150,000 or something. So Lightning, so if you are not paying, if you pay 10 times as much attention, if you think Lightning Network gets a certain amount of attention, wrapped Bitcoin should get like 10 times. That's still too little for wrapped Bitcoin. It's not disproportionate. But of course, Lightning gets a ton of attention, and these other things that people actually use get no attention. And so this just speaks to how, and it's like, the other thing is the psychological and social aspects of it are horrendous, which is people feel very uncomfortable criticizing Lightning. When you talk to people in a bar, this happened for years, and I would say, well, like it doesn't work. The problem would say, what do you have against the Lightning Network? I'd say, well, it doesn't work. The HTLCs don't work. They don't work when nothing works when the fees are high. Nothing works when the fees are volatile. No one wants to be online and have their private key. They need to sign to receive money. They need to have a hot wallet with their private key on the internet. None of it works. Like the whole thing, you can't onboard enough people. Like nothing about it works. But then people would say, oh, you shouldn't criticize Lightning because then you won't get like invited on stage. People will say things like that. So when you see the integrity collapse like that, actually the whole culture is actually a sinking ship. And so the crazy thing about that is the software space is so competitive that it means that there may be more opportunities to make huge amount of money off betting against these people. But that's a kind of a complicated conversation. But basically, the big problem with the Lightning Network is the followers. So everyone wants to just look the other way. Every Lightning person either is totally ignorant of the facts, or they know that the facts are bad, and they are lying about, they're lying to try and hope that it is like Theranos, where they're just trying to get or Thomas Edison, where he didn't have the working light bulb. It was all fake for a while. And then just in time, he figured out how to get the cheap light bulb right before he ran out of money. And Elizabeth Holmes modeled Theranos on that. All the demonstrations were fake. The little blood machine didn't work, and everyone knew it didn't work. But they were just going to keep it going, try to keep it going until they can make it work. And that is what ARC is. ARC is just the latest attempt to get it to work. But it doesn't work. And it will be, think about like how long it will take to even get the soft fork and to even then get software that understands the dev tooling to get like the wallets, the front-facing user interface. And that is stuff that we already had working earlier this year. And when the CUSF transition is complete, we already have like a graphical user interface, a wallet, and all this other stuff. I think all this whole thing is because this is why I'm going on this speech, as you mentioned this idea of like eCash and okay, if people are using custodial Lightning, then they can get. But everything is going to evolve in the wrong direction. And that is why BIP 300 and CUSF are so controversial, because they put us back on the right track, and no one is going to care about what any of these other people had to say after their incompetence is revealed.
There's a lot to unpack there, but I think ARC is just a more centralized version of Lightning. And I did interview the guys from Decred, and this guy who is one of the lead developers of the Decred project explained to me that he was able to make the Lightning Network much more efficient with something that would require some changes to the base layer in Bitcoin. But I don't see or hear anyone talking about this in the Bitcoin space, saying, these guys with their altcoin, they were able to make Lightning work more efficiently. How about we look into this?
Well, probably, I don't know the details of that, but think about, this is the other issue, is the more difficult the BIP process is, the more it deters people from even investigating in the first place. I mean, we have seen over the last few years, the big line is, oh, we can do this on Bitcoin without a soft fork. But the whole point of the soft fork was that you could do it without everyone upgrading, and without, you could do it without a hard fork. That was the trick before. So I think people just want to live in a world where, I mean, in one sense, people say Bitcoin is the best software and you can't improve on it. But then that's, the reality is that very few people are even looking. Because like, what would you do if you found this? What would you do? You find an improvement. Oh, I can make Lightning more efficient. What are you going to do? Are you going to write a BIP? Like, most people don't know how. It's a huge amount of time. Then everyone will hate the BIP, because now another perverse incentive is that since the BIPs are not activating, there's this jostling in place for line, in the line of activation. Because it's perceived as an either or, when in reality we should just activate them all. So it's perceived like if you have a new BIP, like you have CTV and then someone has TX hash, it's like, which one are we going to do first? When in reality, we should just activate them all, because we can always deactivate them later. So it makes no difference. So, but now if you have a new BIP, then all the other BIP authors are going to they have an incentive to criticize your BIP. And then you get this table, which I think the floppy disk guy is great. The previous version of that table was for SegWit2x, and that was to create political opposition to SegWit2x. And I was also on there as saying SegWit2x is not a good idea. And one of the reasons what I said is that there's no reason for SegWit2x because we could just have large block L2 drive chain that was back in 2017. So now the floppy disk guy has copied that and he has made it multidimensional. So you can now weigh in on multiple BIPs. But this is why the prediction market would be good. Because the prediction market would be something that pays off a certain amount of money based on when the BIPs activate. And my guess is that the smart money would be betting that none of them will activate for a while. Even when they did L-enhance and CTV, the activation parameters, they don't even start for a few months, and then the minor signaling period is multiple years, and then they activate in 2028 or something. So the fact that people would even consider that shows you that how little everyone still understands about the soft forks can be turned on with a soft fork and then shut off with a soft fork. And it's true that we don't want to create emergency situations, but what the emergency situation is people are spending money into a certain type of script and then spending money out of it. It's very limited, the emergency. The whole thing is about political control, because the more that the L1 changes with respect to these optional opt-in soft forks, which again, Satoshi put in the op-nops exactly for them to be used for this purpose, and they have already been used for this purpose. But the more that the L1 changes, the easier it is to build a better mousetrap and outflank Lightning and outflank Arc. So people want to build a little fiefdom. They want to have a Lightning fiefdom. And then they don't want Bitcoin to improve, and including the custodial fiefdom. They want the custodial fief. They say, well, of course, the last thing you want, if you want people to have their Bitcoin in a legal framework, like a corporation. So if you want a corporation to have Bitcoin custody with BitGo or something, or Fireblocks or whatever, but it's protected by a legal document. The worst thing in the world for BitGo would be if multi-sig improved, if it was easier to run a full node and that improved, key management improved. The worst thing in the world for Michael Saylor's corporatist position would be if more people took an interest in running full nodes and taking self-custody. Then they would think, why am I giving my coins to someone else? So the custodial fiefdom is one of these many fiefdoms that the more L1, the worse L1 gets, the better something else gets. So that is part of it. And today we would really have to weigh the, the computers and internet speeds have improved enormously. The idea that the full node would be negatively affected by these opcode types is, is absurd. So
but there's a lot of concerned trolling, right? People come up with ideas that are no longer feasible. It seems like some guys are stuck in 2017, and that was the peak of their involvement and their willingness to learn. And afterwards, they just embraced this ideology where they said, we're the smartest guys in the room. Blockchains don't scale. Don't even think about doing this and that. You can't scale blockchains with other blockchains. You should build second layers. You should do client-side validation, even if it's hard. Maybe take 10 more years to figure it out.
I agree. Yes, I agree.
And even so, I'm not sure if you take any sides in this whole covenant situation. I do know that some covenants can enable Drivechains, even though it's not the ideal way to do it, and it
Yes.
doesn't grant the users the right protections. But my point is that I did join the Cult of the Covenant group on Telegram, and people pointed out to me that I should look into the conversations that were being had in 2021 or 2022 between Adam Back and Jeremy Rubin. And it's fascinating to see how Adam Back basically joined the group, spent some time trolling the project, and within 2 weeks he was able to demoralize everyone and delay the activation debates by another 2 years.
Yeah, I don't know if he intended to do that or not, or because of course he is a sharp guy.
But there's also, let me finish. There's also the marketing side that's trying to portray Jeremy as this insane guy who has no idea what he wants. Like there's Grubbles, who is very much against anything that Jeremy does. And my suspicion is that Blockstream is either working on a CTV alternative, and they're going to promote that as the soft fork that we need to push forward, or else maybe they just want to maintain political control, because Blockstream is not a profitable company. They're not selling anything that's profitable. I think mining might be the only product that's making them money.
No, I think mining is certainly losing them money.
Liquid is not making money. The Jade Harbor wallet is not making money.
Mining is so real that you cannot fake. You cannot just get up there and say, "Well, we have Adam Back, and we have," because Adam Back is great, but it's not like Adam Back can just smile at the miners and make them more profitable or something, you know. So, but of course, but I think the sun is setting on Blockstream, even though it's a miracle it made it this long in a way, because they don't put anything out. I don't know how much actual prestige. I think people love Adam Back, including me, and Adam Back's a huge supporter of mine, which I appreciate. But it doesn't just make a profitable company. Okay, so a lot of different things to say. So my position on covenants is that the entire covenants project is a mental illness. Every single one of them is a mistake, but nonetheless, we should still activate all these soft forks, because they are completely harmless. The idea that we must debate a soft fork is just Luke Dash Jr.'s mistaken idea of needing consensus for soft forks, which we don't. And miners should turn them on and off as they think that it will increase the price of Bitcoin. Imagine a completely different conversation where Foundry announces and they say, CTV has been invented by Jeremy Rubin. We will now activate it. And we hope that this will bring these new use cases and new options to Bitcoin, and we hope that this will make us more money. And in fact, as a publicly traded company, we have a fiduciary duty to maximize our own shareholder value, and we must. That would be a rational world, actually. But then all these people say, oh, if we do soft fork, we might do this. This is all because people do not want the L1 to improve, because it alters which L2 trade-offs are better. So for example, people who are bet on BitVM and you tool the whole thing on BitVM. So it's ironic because Robin Linus is a huge fan of mine. And I think he's great also, but I think Sergio is also a huge fan. Everyone's a huge, but Sergio is doing like a BitVM thing. Now he's not going to want BIP 300 to activate, because all the work he's done related to BitVM would be unnecessary, and it would just not do anything. So this is the real issue: is people make investments. They make specific investments in their tech stack that rely on the L1 being a certain way. All these people are making a huge mistake, because, as I've said, the end game, when the miners care more about fees than the block reward, the end game will all be mined L2s that pay the transaction fees to miners. So I have a lock on the end game. There's no way. Of course, anything can happen in technology, but all this is all a mistake. And I don't think any people really don't even care. They just think, oh, I can be like Lightning Labs. I can raise $55 million, $90 million, whatever. And we'll just raise all this money. People don't even care about the fact that it's not going to work. And it's like an ego thing too. With Blockstream, you know, they have simplicity. Although no one has heard from simplicity in a while. So is it still around? Simplicity, the joke is that it should be renamed complexity. But whatever, so they want that. So again, this is the incentive. When you have a situation where it's difficult to activate the BIP, where the BIP activation is scarce, you must like care about which one is first in line. So then the BIPs compete with each other. But this is all of it's irrational. So the entire covenants thing is a mistake. Covenants are a mistake. Lightning was a mistake. The last 9 years have been wasted and have made the project worse. We've been making the project worse and worse and worse and worse. BIP 300 teleports us out of this back to safety. But nonetheless, all of the, I mean, I thought about adding my name to the table, but I don't know if I should or not. I would just put like weak. There's one that's like better than nothing. I would just put that for all of them. But I don't know, that would be seen as a troll. People would think, oh, he's just trolling the table. But that's my honest opinion, is that all of them are better than nothing. All of them are perfectly safe. The idea that we need consensus for soft forks is flatly untrue. And in fact, it is just an excuse for all these people to pretend to be important by talking to each other on Twitter instead of shipping something that actually works. And then competing for real users. The users are not going to use something where the payment can fail. So your Lightning stack, your Arc stack, it needs to hit 399 times out of 400. You know what I mean? Like if you have two cards, you have a Visa and a MasterCard, and you know that maybe MasterCard will miss one out of every 200 times, and Visa always works. And you're in line at the supermarket, you will never take out the MasterCard. You say, oh, this one doesn't work sometimes. It's embarrassing. It's annoying. I mean, so of course it's a trade-off and there's some number, but really Lightning is too interactive. The fees are high. When it's either custodial, a wallet of Satoshi gets pulled from the App Store, or to actually make it work, the fees are high because it's difficult to manage the liquidity. People cheat on managing the liquidity with the submarine swaps, where there's for every Lightning transaction there's an L1 transaction. Well, it's like, well, wait a minute, I thought you were doing that. You were taking care of the. I thought I didn't have to use L1. That's the whole point of this. So none of this stuff will be competitive in the long run. It is all just a developer grift. So the whole covenants thing is so. But nonetheless, we should activate all the soft forks. So I've been repeating that's my point.
I think that's the best approach, to let the free market decide, to let the users try all of them and figure out for themselves if there's anything valuable. Because obviously there's gonna be investments in one or the other. And maybe this might dictate which one is going to win eventually, because marketing and user experience are also important. It's not just the best idea that wins. But it's important to have competition for finding solutions to scale Bitcoin and make it more private. It's just that it seems like some people have given up. The ETF seems to be the scaling layer. And for privacy, I went to Monerotopia last month, and I did see that quite a lot of OG Bitcoiners were there. And it seems like they sort of gave up on the idea of even trying to improve privacy in Bitcoin. They're saying, okay, we're fine. We're going to have not 21 million, but maybe 100 million coins in the world for the stuff that we want, and that's fine.
Well, I mean, Monero is like a pretty important. The Monero people have their like, you can only serve one god, right? So Monero people are serving the privacy god. And as I explained earlier, the official position of Bitcoin is not that we will make Bitcoin as private as possible, as rapidly as possible. So intentionally not doing that, unfortunately. So this open, if anyone who wants to be creative and do something new must do this different thing. You know, they must do the altcoin route.
I mean, that's where you find the interesting experimentation, because it doesn't have the same boundaries. You can see people actually trying something. Like, there are a lot of academic papers that get published with ideas and proposals. I did have Nick Jonas from, no, it's Jonas Nick from Blockstream, and Liam Egan from Alpen Labs, and also, who was the third one? Oh, Robin Linus from ZK Sync or Zero Sync. So they did co-author this paper in which they described shielded client-side validation and how that can work as a protocol on top of Bitcoin, and to provide a large number of transactions per second with good privacy, Zcash level privacy. And that's fascinating, except that there's almost zero demand for it. So they put out this paper in the wild, and the reactions from Bitcoiners were at most a retweet, but they don't seem to care. And it takes money, it takes a few years of your life to build something like this. And if you do it and then you discover that there's no demand, I think that's one of the most painful experiences you can have.
Well, I mean, I don't really know. You might be right about that. I do think, like, science is kind of like someone is lost on the mountainside, and we need the rescue operation to find them, And so someone takes the north side and someone takes the west side or whatever. We're a search party, right? And we all go out. We're looking for the person. And then the other person, and then someone you hear on the radio, oh, we found the person. Okay, then we all meet back at base camp, at the lodge. And they say, where was they? And then, oh, they were on the south part of the mountain. It's not like you say, oh, I searched the west part, but I wasted my time. Right? That's you wouldn't say that, because you would say, oh, we all had to look everywhere to find the thing that worked. Is that making sense or no?
It does make sense. Sorry, I was reading the comments. It seems like we have a very colorful and active chat with people commenting on stuff.
They saying anything good?
They do say some good stuff. So I guess at one point we're gonna stop and read what they're saying, and
okay.
maybe.
But I do agree with your point that, like, people have to choose how to invest their time, and if they look at this and they think, well, no one cares, then of course they're gonna, they'll be at Monerotopia or whatever. So then the maximalist position starts to look really stupid, because then it's just like, oh, you have your thing that you really want to do that other people want you to do, and that it will actually have an effect on the world, and that it will make people money, and they'll be so happy that you did it. You shouldn't do that thing, like, whatever. Like, then, but well, okay. I mean, do you want to read? What did they say? Anyone have a good question or anything?
We'll get to that. I just also wanted to mention that I did an interview with the guys from Starkware, because they were working on this proposal to do covenants without a soft fork, right?
Mm-hmm.
With TapScript and something that's already available. But that's one of the most expensive ways to do a covenant. It's almost like a way to prove that, yes, you can do this, but no, it's not useful. So, of course, you need some sort of covenant to make it affordable for the end user.
There's two interpretations of this. The good interpretation, and this is what I think people are doing, similarly to, I think this is part of what Andrew Polster was doing, of saying, right now, like, listen, it's basically saying, listen, this thing that you think we should never, ever, ever be able to do, we actually can do it now. It's just kind of expensive. So why don't you just drop the issue? So I think that's the good interpretation. all of these things also have a cynical interpretation, which is that this is all just for the attention and this is just to show off. Look at my weird paper. I can make weird collisions, you know. So that is the cynical interpretation. Similarly for CUSF, for the soft fork CUSF, it's like, listen, these soft forks will happen if they make miners money. They will not happen if they do not. The miners are the only one who throws a switch. So complete non-issue now. The question of how to activate soft forks, which is the question, just doesn't exist anymore. And yeah, so those are the two interpretations of that. I mean, like, what will people actually use at the end of the day? That's what I'm the most interested in. I try to build that. I think that is the long run winner. And the other stuff, I think people don't actually care if anyone uses it or not. People will want privacy. You know, so it's interesting that, you know, people have been trained not to use the soft. They've been trained to just go on Coinbase and buy Bitcoin the same way you would buy a stock, the same way you would buy MicroStrategy. People have been trained to do that. So, and again, the worse the software is, if there's no user-friendly multisig, if there's no user-friendly wallets, Bitcoin Core, it didn't support the BIP 39 word list for a long time, and as far as I know, it still doesn't. I haven't really checked in a while.
No, they don't.
Why is the multi-sig is you are 100 times more likely, I'm making this up, 80% of statistics are made up, but like you are very likely to just destroy all of your own money if you try to use multi-sig, because people do not know that you have to back up the whole thing with all the keys and the public keys and the number, the quorum number. You have to back up like this whole thing. The private keys are not enough. You need to back up this like giant file. And people don't know that. So if you try to, but we could easily fix all this. But there's no interest in the front end. There's no interest in the graphical user interface. There's no interest in the user experience. In other words, people want the software to just continue to get worse. And that's what, and then people, you know, whatever, Ava Chow, whatever, they just say, that's exactly what we want. We want this status quo. So that's the problem. They say, if we change it and it gets worse, we'll be blamed. So then there's zero changes, there's zero improvements.
Well, that's why I still do the podcast, right? Because it's easy to get jaded and disillusioned and have no hopes for the future and just assume by default that Bitcoin is never improving and we're politically captured, and this is actually a delegated proof of stake system where the guy with the most coins can actually shut down innovation. But I'm trying to change the culture. I'm trying to present to people that there is a lot of interesting stuff out there. Listen to it with an open mind, try to understand what it does, look at it as software, and don't think too much about the money aspect of it, because it makes no sense as long as it's not even activated. Just experiment with stuff.
You will get the last laugh, because eventually the difference between what the technology will support, like what you know, what Eric Voskuil can do and what all these other people can do, everyone else, you know, Fluffy Pony and everyone, Roger Ver, because adoption is a kind of technology. So it's a kind of innovation. I suppose it's a kind of innovation if it's not a kind of technology, but it's so there will be so if Bitcoin Core stays here and the state of the art of the technology increases, then there'll be this gap. And if something cannot go on forever, it won't. So eventually the gap will be so big that it'll be possible for anyone to just launch a new coin that scales to the whole planet and has user-friendly multisig and it has BIP 39 and it has side chains and it has privacy. Eventually the tech stack will get so powerful when just anyone can do that, and the full nodes fit on everyone's laptop, and everything syncs in 35 minutes despite processing 8 transactions for 8 billion people. The tech stack will get so big that it will eventually just become whatever is adopted fastest will have the network effect. and you understand that that will be once you reach a situation where something's big and it has network effect, and something smaller, which is for the non-network effect reasons, it is better. It catches up, then it will be a blowout, and that thing will take over. That will go planet. So one coin will reach planetary scale, and there will only be one survivor. I have always believed that, and I still believe that. None of the reasons why that has, because you have strong network effects, but you also have strong other effects. If only the network effects matter, then the US dollar would win. But there are these other effects. One is that it's very hard to use the US dollar in a country that, like in Europe, or no one wants to give up the seniorage benefits. Another issue is that using the US dollar in the United States has the disadvantage that you pay the inflation tax, which is going to be very high because our budget. I mean, maybe the funny thing is it would be disastrous for Bitcoin if Elon could actually cut $2 trillion from the deficit and balance the budget, and they'll get the whole money supply shrinking again, and there'd be deflation, and there'd be American prosperity is in some sense bad for Bitcoin. Not completely unreal, it's a little more nuanced than that, but anyway, you're going to get the last laugh because the technology will continue to improve, and eventually it will be, an iPhone versus a Motorola Razr or something,
Yeah, at the end of the day, it is technology. Even if some people worship the current version of the code like it's some sort of holy scripture, is that the way you describe it? Holy textbook or whatever. They just make some assumptions that this is where it's at and it can never get replaced. And, it's only been 16 years. And Bitcoin was built with technology, with libraries that were available in the early 2000s. In the meantime, we have a lot of interesting stuff that was built by virtue of Bitcoin existing. And it's only a matter of just reaching not just scale, but also the features that people want. And I do see some of that in Solana. Of course, it doesn't scale because it's centralized. So it's silly to assume that it does scale, but it seems like they're pushing, and they have a very optimistic philosophy for reaching their goals. And possibly that's why they keep on succeeding.
I mean, they have more decentralized now than they were in, I think, January 2022, when there was just one node. So that's part of the spectrum. We're going to explore the whole spectrum of decentralization. So there'll be totally centralized, very decentralized, everything in between, probably.
I used to hate Eric Voorhees for making this point that
I know,
decentralization is a spectrum.
No, he got the last laugh on the competition
He
point.
did.
Yeah.
And also decentralization as a spectrum. Like, this guy was very much ahead of his time. He was a Bitcoin maximalist in 2013.
Yeah, because back then it was like, what's competing with Bitcoin was like Litecoin, which is like exactly the same. So the competition was really kind of like a sham, like in the sense that there was nothing really new about Litecoin. The altcoins were not really, there was nothing really new. And they were just people launching coin to make money. And plus a bunch of really weird people, NXT, which had like 100% pre-mine, and BitShares, Dan Larimer, So the competition was just horrible. And so anyone who walked up and said, "Oh, well, don't you want? Why should we just bet everything on Bitcoin?" And it was like, yeah, because of network effects, because it's the only good idea. Now it's kind of traded places to some extent, where the Bitcoin maximalists have no idea the issues with Bitcoin, and they have no idea that they may in fact be the retail that is dumped on as something else gets out the vote, gets at the adoption and tech stack. And it's reversed, and the people who are pro competition are just having fun and doing whatever they want and just having a great time. So yeah, competition is a monopoly can destroy anything, because of complacency. And that's with Bitcoin Core. After winning the block size war, after winning all this other stuff, now we have a situation. I mean, do you think that what is it, Xano or whatever? What is it called? The privacy lightning or whatever that you were mentioning before. They're thinking, how can we make the product as good as possible as quickly as possible? They're not making a stupid little Wikipedia table and asking people's opinions about
No, but
TX hash.
their goal has been from the very beginning to use the crypto node protocol for tokens. So they're trying to be like sort of the Ethereum of the Monero world, where you can issue assets and do some very light contracts because they don't have the EVM side of it. But on the blockchain, all the assets are equal to the native asset. So there is no distinction. You cannot really tell between them. And I think that's pretty interesting. On the other hand, I wish this was happening on Bitcoin. And it hurts to see. I mean, of course, it's useful for experimentation to exist elsewhere. But what hurts is that nobody even cares to look at it and say, maybe let's figure out how to bring this to Bitcoin. And this is why I like you, Paul, because you think in terms of how to make this sidechain work. And of course, there are trade-offs. They're very clear that I think it's outlined in BIP 300 that these are miner-controlled sidechains. But it's so much better to have that within the ecosystem as opposed to giving up on the whole pursuit and submitting to a federation. There is so much cowardice in this space. I did this privacy magazine and I wrote an article that's called On the Limitations of Bitcoin Privacy. And I made the argument that pretty much all the ideas that are right now in privacy projects started out as Bitcoin proposals. And the more time you spend searching for Bitcoin talk, you're going to find even Satoshi mentioning zero knowledge proofs and the idea that you can rewrite the Bitcoin client in a more efficient way if you have better cryptography and better libraries. And the fact that Bitcoin is stagnant and is not improving is not an accident, is not, it's maybe the sum of a lot of people's willingness to not improve it. And they became complacent. They discovered this powerful narrative that they can push to investors, to governments. And maybe that it's the way it's meant to be, right? Because they believe in this Trojan horse approach where basically you're welcoming governments to invest, and once they have some skin in the game, it's going to become impossible to regulate. And you also have this entire crypto space alongside Bitcoin that's trying new stuff. And maybe eventually we'll get to the point where Bitcoin becomes the one currency. But right now, it seems like we're heading towards this multi-chain world. And in the beginning, I was not very comfortable with the idea. I just realized that maybe that we failed. But on the other hand, maybe that there's no other way to succeed. And if Bitcoin had everything, it could be easier to ban from the beginning. And now we get these. You are in Nashville, right?
Yes, of course, yes.
And you saw all these politicians praising Bitcoin.
But that has been going on for a long time, even since the 2019 the first conference in San Francisco, where we had, I think.
Sure, there was the mayor and stuff like that, where I guess the guests, the hosts, and they were welcoming everyone. But my point is that it's very strange to have all of these people who otherwise are very ignorant of Bitcoin suddenly praising it. And then you have you seen that documentary that David Bailey has produced with celebrities who talk about Bitcoin?
No,
Thank
I haven't.
God for Bitcoin. I think that's what it's called. It's on YouTube. It's insane. You feel replaced to a degree. You're like, well, why am I even here? We got to this point where we have these big names talking about Bitcoin like it's the best thing since bread came sliced, and it solves all the problems, and it's basically the talking points that you've seen from Saifuddin and Jimmy Song, but said by, I don't know, what's the name of the Shark Tank guy?
Kevin O something.
Kevin O'Leary, and there's also Mark Cuban. So
Yeah.
you get both of them who were critics of Bitcoin now praising it. You're like, what am I even doing here
I
anymore?
don't think it's necessarily, I mean, okay, think about it like this. Imagine that your life is a series of you being first to something that later goes mainstream.
Oh, it sounds so hipster-esque, right? We find the cool band
But
and then we...
well, I mean, think about it like this. You're going to be making a huge amount of money. There's going to be a next Bitcoin. Just as no one early in the early days of Bitcoin, you didn't, I'm just saying hypothetically in this example, but I think it could literally be true as well. If your life is just a series of being early, then you could be, you can be the first investor in Google, you can be the first investor in SpaceX, you can be the first investor in Bitcoin, you can be the first investor in whatever, all these other things, and you can say, well, I understand all these people are just they're just doing what the people around them do. They're sheep, but I understand what they're going to like in 5 to 10 years. So that doesn't sound so bad,
Yeah, but this also means that all of our ideas of turning Bitcoin into the currency that's going to replace everything
I don't think
turned
that
out to be
those ideas
bullshit.
are not dead. I think those ideas will survive. In fact, as I pointed out with the whole gap thing, eventually there may be a coin. There may come a time when the complacency is so strong that a different coin is poised to just take over and hit 8 billion users and go to 300 trillion, and then Bitcoin will go to zero in that scenario. So the fact that we have more of an awareness of how it actually works is not necessarily like a curse. It has beneficial aspects.
I also believe that at one point someone's gonna figure out a way to do internet money without a blockchain in a decentralized way, so solve the trilemma somehow. And if someone ever does that, I think that's the end of the entire industry. That's gonna be like a reset.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing about innovation is innovation, it destroys when you out innovate someone, then they everything goes to zero, Netflix versus Blockbuster or whatever. So I think, again, the idea that you are early and that everyone around you is catching up to you, and now it's going mainstream, but it's going mainstream in a lame version that is not that is a cheap knockoff of the real deal. That's not really so bad. I wouldn't worry about that too much.
Okay, let me plug the sponsors and then we can get to questions that we have in the chat. Yeah, we have to do that. So Sideshift.ai, we are in the middle of this bull market. Everything is going up. It's irrational for you to hold stable coins, honestly. If someone offers to pay you in those, just swap them for free market money and use Sideshift because they have pretty good liquidity, they have low fees, and I don't think they work in the US, unfortunately. I'm not gonna tell you exactly how you can make it work in the US because I'm not allowed to, but if you have a brain, you can figure it out. And it's pretty cool. They have a nice interface. You just swap that CBDC wannabe for free market money, and they have a very rich offering. There's a lot on the menu. You have BTC, used to have Lightning, but now you have rootstock BTC.
I think Sideshift was the first exchange to implement Lightning, and Liquid also, but maybe also the first to remove. There's a terrible ideas and the volume is very low. I mean, I hate to interrupt the ad read, but
yeah, they did give up on Lightning, I think, last year, and they were very much ahead.
Yeah, first in, first out, because they're the only because these people who talk about Lightning, they have never used it. These are people who tweet about it. They haven't formed their opinion of Lightning based on their experience with the product.
By use, I guess you mean that they haven't run a node, because maybe that they have this mobile wallet and they're like, oh, wallet of Satoshi, look, it works.
They don't even realize that that's not Bitcoin. That's not Lightning either.
Anyway, Sideshift, it's very cool. Sideshift.ai, check them out. And there's also No Ones. They're a new sponsor. It's the first episode that they sponsored today. It's this peer-to-peer marketplace that's trying to unite the global south with the rest of the world to destroy the financial apartheid. Ray Youssef is the CEO and the founder. You might know him from his days in Paxful, and now he's trying to build something that's pure ideologically and not just pure from a Bitcoin only perspective. He's trying to build something with free markets for gift cards, for lots of stuff that people want to use. And to create, there was this whole idea, right, back in 2013 that was circulating in the Bitcoin space that we're going to bank the unbanked. And I think these peer-to-peer marketplaces are sort of filling into that role. And they're trying to do it with lower fees and pretty good scale and with products that people actually want to trade. And Ray also has this philosophy that everyone eats, which means that you have these ambassadors and hustlers from the global south who are selling products and they're making some fees and they're able to put food on the table. It's pretty cool. So check it out. It's noones.app, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check the URL. No, it's .com. But they also have an app. And they don't do KYC. And that's important. And there's also hodling.ch, which is this business from Switzerland which specializes in self-custody. If you hold a lot of Bitcoin or else you're part of a company that wants to start buying Bitcoin because it's very hip these days, you can reach out to these guys. They'll provide to you a service with very good confidentiality because they're from Switzerland. And they'll let you know what kind of setup you should be using for your use case. So for example, they will tell you if you need a multi-sig, if you should be using hardware wallets, how you should be distributing them, which ones you should be using, and stuff like this. And also, if you have this seed phrase with scrambled words or you're missing a few words, they can also help you recover. So check them out. They're hodling.ch, and I also did an interview with them. You can listen to that one for some free tips. Those were the ads. Thank you for sitting through them. And now let's get to the question part. We have hundreds of comments in the chat. I'm scrolling through them. Most of them are comments for what we spoke about. So let's get to Twitter because this is where the action is happening. There's a guy named BitFrankie in the meantime, and he says, Paul, can you please unblock me on Twitter?
Who is that?
It's BitFrankie. BITFRANKIE.
I don't know. Oftentimes I'm very happy with who I block, but growing up. Okay. If people block me, then I block them back. And I just think I kind of laugh when I do it. I don't really like. But I don't remember. But yeah, and then other things that I think it's totally fair. Sometimes if you just reply, like the replies have to be good, If the reply is just noise, then it's one thing to say that you disagree or that you think an idea is really terrible. But if you're putting stuff out and then people are just stapling a bunch of junk, then it is really about trying to improve the quality of my own feed. So I don't know. These are reasons why I block. But if people block me, I usually block. Usually, I think 99% of the blocks are because someone has blocked me, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll block you then. But I don't really know what it achieves, especially now. I think Elon's making a mistake with the block button. He should go the other way. He is, in one sense, he is saying, okay, if you just open it in a private browsing mode, you can still see all the tweets. So, but I think that he should reconceptualize the block as the person is like a bad person, and they should get deboosted. If people block you, you should get deboosted. But I don't know. I haven't totally figured that out. I don't know.
Well, you cannot comment if someone blocks you, and that's sort of the point. You can still see what they're posting, but you cannot interact. You cannot like, you cannot comment, you cannot retweet.
I mean, it's like I can go to you, you say something, and then I can say, oh, I'm going to reply to this. I block you, then I reply to you. Then you can't reply to that reply. I don't know. It doesn't really make any sense. But I'm sure they're working on it over there on Twitter. I mean, X formerly Twitter.
I still call it Twitter. Anyway, you have some questions. There's early NFT.bit who says many hardened Bitcoiners see you as an enemy of Bitcoin. If you cannot open the eyes of the miners to CUSF without the blessing of those hard asses, then there has to be a point where we, capital W, capital we, we need to give up on BTC as the unit of account of the real Bitcoin and openly embrace another, right? And
yeah, I
he
agree
continues and says, we'll be heretics, branded shitcoiners, which doesn't so much matter, but which may bring undue animosity to the legitimate projects we elect to support. Knowing how this all will likely play out, we should temper our message moving forward to minimize collateral damage.
Well, that's a very intelligent point. That person is correct.
Very nice vocabulary.
However, I think so. The miners don't know anything about anything. I mean, no offense to them, but they I think they find all this stuff totally baffling. But and they have a very low incentive to even look into it, because even if the mining pools are thinking, I'm competing with another mining pool. The individual hashers are thinking, how can I get cheap electricity? If everyone increases like transaction fees by a factor of 10, then that's a little bit of a gain for a while, but after a few weeks, the difficulty rises and then it's wiped out. So actually, it's a little bit of a puzzle. Who would invest the time to learn all of this? I further agree with that person. I mean, that was a kind of me disagreeing, but the idea that if like the door slams closed on Bitcoin, then there will have to be a different project that succeeds, as I was talking with you before. That will happen no matter what. Even if me, you and I, that person, even if we have nothing to do with anything. And like being labeled a shitcoiner, the crazy thing is I'm already labeled a shitcoiner, even though there's literally zero or negative shit. So it's like it's true that literally means nothing. And like the ordinals people are called, which at least makes a tiny bit of sense because they're selling a different thing that you can invest in, even though it's 100% on Bitcoin. So even that is like, that word has really changed its meaning from someone who believes an altcoin is better than Bitcoin to like your Bitcoin project, your Bitcoin art is for sale. But so as far as tempering the message, I think, I don't know if that would work, because we have to actually build a reputation of integrity and telling the truth. So that is the message. And there's no choice but to go. I think so. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what that means. But if it means lie and tell everyone that Lightning is a great idea, which is that's what that used to mean, I think like that's just eventually people will just say that there was no difference between us and the people who were overly optimistic about Lightning. So I don't think that is, I don't know. I'm not sure. That person maybe should be more specific.
Yeah, there's another comment from AOIYNULMXC3. That's quite a mouthful. Could we CUSF BIP 300? What are the other avenues does he see for improving Bitcoin privacy? And what are his thoughts on Monero?
Yes, BIP 300 can be activated by CUSF, CUSF. The other options for adding Bitcoin privacy, these are kind of slightly different questions. I did have this thing called deniability that I wrote and that someone coded and put as a pull request in the Bitcoin core. The patent holder, creator of Google Autocomplete, which later became all this AI stuff, Alex K, he had a pull request in the Bitcoin core for this thing, deniability. The BIP 300 question is more of like a life or death thing, because it's like, do we actually care about improving the software or not? And do we actually care about getting Zcash level privacy in a way that does not even affect L1 Bitcoin? So it's kind of like, it's just such a good idea that it's almost, the people who are against it are really tilting their hand and revealing that their priority is not Bitcoin's success. They have some other priority. So the fact that BIP 300 gives us Zcash level privacy is like a very small effect, in my opinion. It is just one of the infinite things that it does. So Monero, I think, Monero has a focus on actual users, so that is much healthier. I still think that, I think one coin is going to win. So if you're going to win, you have to be the best. You have to be good at everything, and you have to have the biggest network effect. So I don't know if I would like invest and hold Monero. I mean, I don't. So I don't know. That could be a mistake, of course. But I do think most people are sticking with like the number one coin, the Bitcoin coin, and everyone, I think, will jump ship if there actually is a situation where Bitcoin doesn't make it. Bitcoin's either going to make it. Satoshi was 100% correct when he said, in 20 years, there will either be very large transaction volume or no volume. He said, I'm certain. And I think he said that in the year 2010. So that gives us 6 years. So we're 20 years from when he said that. So 6 years from now, I think he's right. Satoshi was right. Either everything will be on Bitcoin maximalism, and there will be huge transaction volume, or everything will be on something else, and Bitcoin will be zero.
But at the same time, Satoshi was very supportive of Namecoin. So
yes, of course. But this is, I think that Satoshi was pro technology, and he was pro inventing all this stuff. He was pro merge mining. He was pro. That's not the same as, and in fact, in the thread where he sort of invents Namecoin and merge mining with a bunch of other people who deserve credit. But in that thread, he talks about having blockchains of different sizes, where there are many unrelated blockchains, and some have very low transaction fees, and some have higher. The Bitcoin L1 would have a high L1 because it would be the most prestigious. So he did think of all that, but I think, once the sidechain, in fact, in that thread, he talks about, unfortunately, it would be a different coin, so it would not be a peg. But actually, I take that as evidence that once the peg idea comes out, Satoshi would be a buyer of that idea, just as he is a buyer of just as he was pro merge mining. So I think that if Monero wants to succeed, it has to actually have its own small block L1, its own side chains, its own whatever. So that's like my guess. I'm not sure about that, but it's definitely possible.
There's another question by Vilela, Vilela.
Mm-hmm.
How does TruthCoin CUSF handle mempool policy? It tackles block consensus with invalidate block, but what about commands like test mempool accept, get mempool info, get AW mempool?
It's a very good question.
Get block template and submit block. These rely on consensus rules and will not be affected.
This is a very good point. So we have, if you go to BIP300CUSF.com, which is the site, and then there's a bunch of software in the download section. And we're actually changing this around, so I feel terrible answering this question on this exact day. But if you go to the site, and there's this thing called the block maker, and that its actual name on GitHub, which we're going to change, but the actual name is BIP300 Mempool Enforcer. I think we're going to change it to CUSF Mempool Enforcer. So it's unfortunate. A lot of the stuff is like in flux right now because it's being actively developed. But basically, this is a tool that basically does like get block template. But these are very good questions where what it does is it looks at the regular mempool from Bitcoin Core. It looks through that and says which of these transactions would get bounced. And also which Coinbase transactions must we include because some of BIP 301 is like a transaction is only valid if there's a Coinbase transaction that matches. So it's a weird, same for BIP 300, the withdrawal has to have matched something that. So it's kind of like purifies, you have like a get block template from Bitcoin Core, and then the template is like refined. And these transactions are all tagged as like requiring like a 21 million Bitcoin fee, which will never happen. So they are sorted out. But that's a very good question. That person whoever that is very serious about whether or not the idea will work. So that would be great if that person would look into, because we are actually tinkering with it now, because it's actually kind of a little confusing if you don't draw a giant diagram, like who is doing what. So we may make a diagram. Because the transactions come in on Bitcoin Core side, and then the miner is going to construct what is the aspirational next block using the mempool, and they cannot include anything that would break a rule that the CUSF enforcer would enforce. So that's a great question, and the answer is that the enforcer not only does the enforcer scan a new block that has come in for any rule breaking, and if it finds rule breaking, it bounces the block and says invalidate block. That's the full node side. There is a separate mining side that says when we construct what we want the next block to be, which transactions can we not have in the mempool? So there is a piece of software for that. And if someone wants to help us test that, and this is all active development right now. So check it out.
Another question that you have is from Sean A. in the YouTube chat, and he says, could the issues with Core be due to a Bitcoin variant of Conway's Law?
Just got to refresh my memory on Conway's Law.
Actually, someone asked in the chat, what is Conway's Law? And I'm reading right now.
Let me just look it up.
No, he didn't say.
Sounds familiar. Yes, this is it.
Can you read it for the people who are not aware?
The connection between a company's internal structure and the results it delivers to end users. So in Bitcoin Core's case, the structure is like this big circle of no one taking responsibility. And as a result, the end user who does take responsibility for their life, the end user says, oh, what am I trying to say? Like the end user wants to go on the darknet market and it only accepts Monero, so they switch. The end user can always switch to the better thing. The end user can always switch from Bitcoin to Monero for their particular use case. And because of that reason, the organization must be optimized to put out the best possible product to minimize the switching, because the end user can switch at the drop of a hat. But we are not set up, we are not optimized for that because there is no structure and because there is no leadership. No one says, if we lose customers to Monero, I will resign and I should be fired. No one says that. I do have something else to do at 3, so can we quickly, how many questions we have? Are there good ones? I don't want to miss any.
I'm scrolling right now. There's a lot of hateful comments.
Great.
Not directed towards you, directed towards Bitcoin.
What do they say?
It's the worst shitcoin, blah, 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 70 PS. I don't know how these guys found the show, but subscribe anyway. Has serious problems syncing on a hard drive. Unfixable, blah, blah, blah.
I think it is true. Someone said something to me once. I hope this person won't mind that I'm taking a brilliant point. I may have brought it up to you before, Vlad, but someone told me at a very prestigious Bitcoin conference with a lot of smart people, and someone said, you know what, it's not a shitcoin if you say you're a shitcoin, then you're not a shitcoin. And what they were getting at is, we in Bitcoin, we are so sanctimonious and we're so high and mighty, you know, and we say like we're so great, but then we lie about Lightning all the time, and we try to say like we try to say that we lie to ourselves and to other people, and we have been doing that for years. So that's what makes it a shitcoin, and that person was correct. I think you just go out there with self-awareness and you say, you know, I mean, Base is the perfect example. Base is like, we're going to be a less decentralized version of Solana, and we don't care, you know.
There's also Sean A, who asks, seems like it would be preferable for Core to support CUSF-like tooling to take pressure off consensus decisions/responsibility.
This is true in an ironic way, which is that many of these people who are very legit people, including Francis Pouillot, the bull Bitcoin guy, he's great. Love Francis Pouillot. His point of view is that Core should never do soft forks. Someone should build a different client somewhere else, get consensus to that, and then Core should update to become compatible. And ironically, this is kind of what CUSF does. And the second irony is that Core doesn't want to take responsibility for this. So you would think, oh, this is great. This is now a tool that removes the responsibility from us, and it has a very clear criterion. This is, as miners run it if it will make them more money. So they think, oh, this. You'd think this would be great. So the fact that Peter and Luke don't like it proves that actually they are on the bad team. It's like you're playing a game of Mafia or Among Us or something. You know, you're playing a game, one of these games. You know what I'm talking about? One of these games where some people are secretly on the evil team, and then the other people are on a good team. You got to figure out who they are. It's like this reveals that they are against good Bitcoin ideas. In a way, I'm not sure how long it will take for everyone else to figure that out, but that.
But for now, I guess it's the easiest to frame you as the one who's sabotaging the project, or at least trying.
One weird thing is that they try to say something like, "Oh, if Paul were just nicer, or if Paul would engage with the process, then his thing would be further up the line."
Yeah, so it's not about the idea; it's about the politics.
It has nothing to do. That is an argument that has literally nothing to do with the objective merit of it. So that's why you actually see that when I hear something like that, I think, okay, I got to run away from the process and do something else. Because the whole thing is being derived from their assessment of the process, according to them, and their infallible knowledge of consensus or whatever. So.
When I interviewed Andrew Polstra, I think this was in April, he did mention something which made me feel a bit concerned. When he said, I think it was about a Covenant soft fork proposal, and
Jeremy had the exact same thing.
I believe it was any prev out.
Yeah.
And he said that he doesn't see it happening because the person who proposed it has lost passion for it. And I'm like, is this really about the best proposal?
It makes no difference, right? Exactly. If the idea is good, it would be literally irrelevant. In fact, the idea could come from Jamie Dimon or something, or it could come from one of our great enemies, whoever, Janet Yellen or whatever. They could write the BIP, and then they could hate the BIP and say this is the worst because it'll make Bitcoin so good. But the fact that they wrote it makes it's a complete ad hominem. And Jeremy had the similar thing happen with him where people said, oh, the problem's not with CTV, the problem's with Jeremy. They said explicitly that So it's explicitly ad hominem. So it's all ridiculous.
Okay, Paul, let's make a closing statement of sorts and just explain to people why they should consider CUSF or CUSF.
Well, it's inevitable, and it is the future of this, and it's the way out of this tangled mess. And the alternative is to do this process on Twitter where you're trying to build consensus among people who all hate each other and whose motivations for disliking the rival projects are inherently strategic and insincere and have nothing to do with the merit of any of the ideas. So the alternative is horrible. I mean, there's like do nothing, ossification, which is also not a very appealing idea. And then there's like try to do whatever. I mean, in a sense, there is no alternative, because what is the BIP process? No one knows. So whereas I have this other thing that it's just something that miners can either run, and they can stop running it at any time. The soft fork deactivates. Whoever used it may lose money at that point, whoever has coins in the feature. But no one actually, there's no one on Earth who's going to, the soft fork activates and then they're going to pour like $100 million into the, everyone will just be testing it at first. We need to get to an idea where miners, there's a little bit, where there's less of a risk of each soft fork. We reduce the risk, then it's possible to do more soft forks, things can be more experimental. The existing ideas about why the soft fork and why not are all incorrect. The soft fork does not require consensus. The soft fork is not a change to the existing protocol, because the existing protocol survives intact and may not even be aware of new variants of it that have a soft fork activated. So the whole situation is, oh, and the soft fork, the soft fork is the difference between us being able to have ossified L1 with a small block size plus a huge list of features: planetary scale, Zcash privacy, EVM compatibility, the ability to issue assets and do Namecoin, all this stuff. So this is like like a huge issue. This is the number one thing to make Bitcoin a success, and is just to have these soft forks. And the thing blocking them is this consensus process that doesn't work, and CUSF is a complete solution to that problem. But it does require everyone to admit that how wrong they were about the soft fork process and what the soft fork is, which I think very few people actually understand it to this day. Although another benefit of CUSF is that it does kind of teach you what a soft fork is. It's something where invalidate block is triggered if something happens. And that's why it's so harmless, because you could already trigger invalidate block just because miners just wake up and they just decide that every block that ends in a 3, they're going to invalidate or something. So those are some reasons. I hope that's enough for people to at least look into it a little.
Yeah, one final question and then I'll let you go.
All right.
For the longest time, for longer than a decade, you have been known as the prediction market guy. And you've been trying to push this, and you've been speaking highly of the potential of prediction markets, and you tried to build it on Bitcoin, and you tried to bring it on a second layer, on a sidechain. And then all of a sudden you see Polymarket taking off on Ethereum. And it's good to see that the idea succeeded. The first time that I interviewed you, you said...
I don't feel that bad. It's not like I'm pinning my entire life on whether or not I'm the prediction market guy. I really like the prediction market idea. And it's not the worst thing if I can just point in the past and say, listen, I still do that now. I say, listen, this is something that I was saying in 2013 we should put on BTC. And so I was right about that. I'm also right about Drivechain and BIP 300, and I'm right about CUSF also. I'm right about all these things. So it's like, what do you want me to do? It's not my fault that everyone else is so slow. But the prediction market thing is a great idea. There's still, if you look at what I present on bitcoinhivemind.com, I have lots of presentations and documents and things. The version, what is done on Polymarket is still only the tip of the iceberg. A small percentage of what is possible with prediction market. And I have mentioned this many times and written about it. So there's still plenty of time for Bitcoin to be the better prediction market thing. Prediction markets are the future. They are better. They're just better at everything because they aggregate information from all sources and then broadcast it back out to all observers. So many such cases. I'm been right about lots of different things, and I'm right about these things I'm talking about today also. So you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait 11 years to get on board with CUSF. You can just do it today.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you to the 850 plus people who listen to this live. I hope there will be 1,000 more listening offline. Not offline, when we go offline. And also special thanks to the sponsors LayerTwo Labs, NoOne'sHuddling.ch, and SiteShift.ai. I'll let you go, Paul, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks.